everyone. Welcome to today's recording at the SOP podcast. Thank you, Steve, for giving us the opportunity to have these very powerful conversations. My name is Rosebella Abok. I am a global customer experience expert. Today, I have a very special guest. I met him more than a year ago at an event we were both invited to. He was invited in the capacity of a mentor and a speaker. And when he made a speech, he went on to say about the 7 habits of highly effective people. He broke down those habits with examples, practical and applicable examples in our day-to-day lives. And when he mentioned he has a book club, I earmarked him as someone I must go and speak to when we get a break during the event. And I did. I went up to Newton. I said hi, and I said, I'd love to join your book club. He was getting a lot of requests on that day. And, he said yes, he obliged. And I said, hey, in my mind, Newton, haunijui. In Swahili, I was like, Newton, you don't know me yet. I will follow up. I will join your book club. So I made these promises to myself, and for sure I did. I followed up, and I joined his book club. And ever since, we've consumed a couple of books, we've reviewed a couple of books, and you'll hear a little bit more about 1 or 2 of those books. I know he cites a lot of them during his conversation. With no further ado, I welcome Newton Siele. Hi, Newton.
Hi, Bella.
How are
Good
you?
to see you again.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be in this podcast. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Newton, a couple of people need to know what you do and the spaces that you play in. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm happy to. So, on my day-to-day life, I'm a CEO. I manage a healthcare organization, so I work with a number of partners in trying to increase access of medicines and healthcare. I would say across. I'm a father, 2 boys, but I am also passionate about reading. So whereas my career is in medicine, and I would say in selling specifically, because I work with hospitals, I also have an opportunity where I get to serve in terms of leadership coaching, passionate about emotional intelligence, and actually now a certified practitioner in emotional intelligence, something that I believe also really puts into perspective what my passion is. So I'm a strong believer in why, and I think every time I talk about myself, I say I believe in having a purpose and living that purpose. And that's what I also share in the leadership forums that I manage and those that I get to mentor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So you have us at emotional intelligence. I think it's a term that's broadly used in different forums. We now have also artificial intelligence, and there's other forms of intelligence out there.
Yeah.
What is emotional intelligence?
I think the best way to put it across, Bella, is to say that there are times you walk into a room and you find a group of people and then you sit down. 2 things can happen, right? You feel like you identify, you like the energy, you like the vibe, and you feel immediately connected. In fact, you want to participate in the conversation. And we say your brain immediately has translated that into a positive emotion, right? And that's how you will behave. You'll probably be happy, you'll greet them quite well. You'll be more than enthusiastic to shake their hands and get to learn more about them. Now, if you look at the complete opposite, sometimes you enter into a room and you feel like you're completely out of place. Either the people are not in a very good mood, people are foul, even the person sometimes that could be leading could be very angry. And what happens is everybody gets closed up, nobody wants to talk, and you get this negative feeling like, this is a place I don't want to be. Automatically, what happens is that's how also your body reacts, right? And we say that's a negative emotion. The part of the brain that is known as amygdala, and you're right that we really talk a lot about this. It's one of those places where our brain has over time evolved to determine the kind of emotion that it will sort of the signal that it will give, but it's based on how it has stored many other things, right? And I think we put it simply as emotional intelligence because it's what people see. Could be positive, and in some cases could be a negative emotion. So people with a high emotional intelligence, for example, have been able to master that, and they understand that for me to gel in with people, I need to know them. I need to first know myself. I need to be aware about them, and then I need to find a way in which I can fit, depending on how the conversations go. I do not have to be confrontative. I'm sure we can find a way that we get to align. Just that agility of being able to blend in, I would say, is part of what signifies a highly intelligent or emotional intelligent person. Yeah.
Okay. I've been in conversations where someone gives an example of walking into a room and having an interaction and walking away from that saying, Bella, so and so is not emotionally intelligent. And I'm, and I'm like, okay, so you assessed this person. First, you assessed the room, assessed this person, and came to a conclusion that they are not emotionally intelligent. Are there metrics? Is there a way to, and I'm asking you, is there a way to measure or quickly assess the same? Also, is it okay to judge, let me use that word, to judge people's level of emotional intelligence? Yeah.
I think it's a good question, Bella, and I wouldn't say that there are metrics per se, but it also depends on which, I would say, school of AI you're sort of looking at it from. Let me use the one that I'm certified in, which is called the Genos certification. I mean, there are competencies that we look at, and we don't have to mention all of them. But as I said, one of them is actually just awareness about yourself, and I'll use that as an example. Somebody who is aware about themselves knows that I, as Bella, we were discussing with you, for example, before the podcast started. Today was really a bad day. I woke up and my kid was insisting to wear something that I didn't want them to, and in your head, you're still thinking that this generation is going to give me pressure. So you leave the house in a very, very bad mood. And then because you're leading a team, when you walk into that particular meeting, you don't realize that the mood that you left with the house is still with you. So you sort of snap at the people in the office, guys, who have you not started? What have you been waiting for? I don't have a lot of time. Things are already so tough. So, and it's not because the people have done anything wrong, but it's somehow carrying this cloud of the same mood that you had. Now, a person who is perceived to be highly or emotionally intelligent, for example, knows that, what, by the way, I've had a bad morning today. So I'd rather push my meeting by about an hour so I can just catch my breath, And that means you're emotionally aware that if I go into this meeting the way I am now, it might not end well. I might snap at people for something they did not do. And that's just one competency that, as I said, can sort of be a giveaway, right? That this person is aware about their own emotions. They're aware about their blind spots, for example. They know that there are certain times that they are in good moods. And when they're in good moods, they'll probably do a lot more approvals or sign-offs than they would when they're in a bad mood. And so when you know that that's the case, if you're going to be having a meeting and you're reviewing something, you try and make sure that, okay, I need to have a balance. That means you're aware about your own emotions. But the second competency, and I think that is something that you would want to consider, is just being aware about the emotions of others. Because the opposite could be true, right? I've seen people like in my industry where you walk into a meeting and probably because the person lives so far and they had to wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, that day maybe the first ride had already left, so they had to wait, stand in the cold for a long time, and then, catch a number of multiple rides to get to the office. So by the time they arrive, they are so tired and they're already so drained, and yet they're expected to be leading a meeting. So somebody who we said that is emotionally intelligent senses that there's something in this team that is not correct. Guys, you look like you are quite tired. Is there something that is wrong, right? And I've seen an example of it was actually a series I used to watch called New Amsterdam on Netflix. You may have heard about it, right?
Watched New
And I
Amsterdam.
remember one time when the medical director walked in and he felt that the energy in the room was not there. And true, when he dug or when he tried to drill deeper, he realized that, my team is spending so much time just traveling that by the time somebody arrives to work, they're already tired. Now, just by sensing that, by being emotionally aware about others, then we would say that you're the kind of a person who is highly or you have a high emotional intelligence because you're practicing awareness about others, right? And that's just, I would say, two examples of competence that you can be able to
Yeah.
to measure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's zoom in on the self-awareness bit, and then let's gel it with leadership. You've mentioned a leader walking into a room and leading a couple of team members, being able to emotionally regulate themselves, identify what sort of spectrum on the emotion that they are in, and what they would need to be at a place where they can resonate with their team. And when you were speaking about that, I quickly asked myself, have I been emotionally intelligent? Have I been able to regulate my emotions such that when I show up to my team as a leader, then I will enable them to be at their best in the workplace? And and for me, I think the uniqueness here is that my direct team members, we have the advantage, let me call it an advantage, of working in a couple of countries in Africa. And so physical proximity for us is not a thing. We're having to be on Teams calls every day in all the different meetings. And in some meetings, our videos are off. So how would I be able to, as a leader, practice a certain level of emotional intelligence in terms of course, being self-aware of the condition that I am in, but trying to pick certain elements of how my teams should show up in their strengths for us to get like very good productivity levels?
Even virtually. I think it's a very important question, Bella. But fortunately, when we talk about even, let's say, communication and being self-aware, we also appreciate that, as I think there are a lot of studies out there, that when you compound the impact, or I would say the relevance of body language in terms of the unspoken, the tone of voice, the gestures, and I'm going to sort of underline tone of voice, assuming it's virtual here. If that alone contributes about, we estimate that it's about 93% of the communication, right? And the words that you say are only about 7%. It also means that even in a virtual session, if we start a meeting, and let's say I'm your colleague and I'm based in, for example, Ivory Coast, right? And then when you start the meeting and say, good morning, everyone, how was your weekend? We'd like to start our review for this week. Maybe you could quickly have briefs from everybody. And then at the back end, you can hear me saying, oh my God, I forgot to unmute, right? To mute my,
To
my,
mute
my
your
mic.
mic, yes.
Then you hear me, Newton, saying on the other end, oh my God, not another
Yes.
boring meeting.
Yes.
Now, that could be something that can tell you that there is a disconnect, isn't it? Or I could actually unmute, and then you can hear from my tone of voice. I'm like, Bella, yes, my report is ready. Do I need to read it, or can I share my screen? You can hear the way my voice is, right? And you can tell that it's something that is not right with this person. And so the same way, I think you don't necessarily have to see somebody physically. You can tell from their voice that are they connected? What sort of questions are they asking? So we are in the middle of a discussion and we're like, okay, guys, we'd like to pause. Is there anybody with any question or any clarification that is required? If we are rolling out a new strategy, Bella, it has never been rolled out in the company before. It's the first time we're hearing it. It's a new product. And then I don't have any
Any
questions.
questions? That's a sign.
That's a sign, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And so it tells you that the same competencies, you can sort of pick it out, right? And you can tell when somebody's typing a message, for example, how they're asking, the tone of how they're asking. Those are salient things, but you can be able to note out that there's a disconnect here. Yeah.
Yeah. Then same goes for email, I guess. So whilst we're covering communication, there's all these different communication channels.
Yes.
And sometimes a lot can get lost
Yeah. Yeah.
in how people put their words together into a sentence.
Absolutely.
Whether that's on an email or even a WhatsApp text message, right?
Absolutely.
A lot can get
Absolutely.
lost.
Absolutely.
And there's people that have preferred voice notes, for example, on WhatsApp. Let's even go there. Because you're thinking, no, I'm not going to type this. Let me just use a voice note. And so we are saying across the different channels, we need to take a beat, before you press that send. You just need to, review
No,
what you've
absolutely.
written.
Absolutely.
Try and put yourself in the shoes of the person that's receiving the message. And, quickly just say, if I was receiving the same message, how would it land?
Or even think of it this way, Bella. I'm writing an email to you, and then I'll put Bella as a 2, right? But on the CC, I CC your boss. I CC your former boss.
Boss is boss.
Boss is boss. Everybody else, and even by the time you're reading the message, you're trying to see, okay, what was the action point that was expected of all these other people. And if I'm just saying, dear Bella, further to our discussion, please find. But the intended action is just for you,
Yes.
right? And it's not like there's a tornado that is about to blow up in the office. That's why everybody gets to know it,
Copied.
right? But it tells you
Yes.
about the presence or lack therein of emotional intelligence in this person. And truthfully, maybe they had an issue, but we usually say in emotional intelligence, so we talk about awareness of self, and then we talk about awareness of others, and then we talk about something called emotional reasoning. And in emotional reasoning, we say that you don't just make a judgment, you first also see how does your feelings impact the judgment, and then what other information do you need so that your judgment is sound. Right? So for somebody who is highly or emotionally intelligent, they don't just make a decision. I would not just send the email and try and put so many things. I'll also ask myself, first and foremost, how is my feeling as I'm doing this email? And how are the words that I'm putting in this email, are they giving a description of myself or just the emotional outburst I have at the moment? A person who doesn't have emotional intelligence doesn't even think of it in the first place.
They just send.
And then secondly, they don't even think, okay, this information I've asked, by the way, could there be anything else that I needed to have included so that the person is able to respond adequately? That's emotional reasoning. And so if you don't have that, then again, as you are saying, it's sort of this person I think lacks emotional intelligence. But it's probably just put it in a very mild way, but that could be one of the things.
Yes.
Which is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were speaking and I immediately went to empathy. And I said to myself, we preach empathy in customer experience and we say, literally, wear the shoe that the customer is wearing. It's metaphorical, but remove yourself and put on the shoes of the customer. Now, how does it fit? Where does it pinch? Are the laces good? Is the condition of the shoe? Walk a mile in the customer. So live a life or describe the customer's journey in such a way. And some of the, can I call them outputs that come out of those forums is, oh my God, I had never seen it that way. I never thought that this is what happens to so and so. And of course, depending on the customer persona and with different business models, that's a different persona, is the oh my God moments, the aha moments are we need to do things differently. We can no longer do things as we've always done them, or our operational processes in-house need to be tweaked to match what our customer is looking for or what our customer needs. Yeah. Okay, so I'm seeing also the application of emotional intelligence when it comes to serving our customers. I put a notice out or I put some form of communication out to our customers. How am I or how are we as a team feeling, or what is our judgment based on? What other information should we give the customer to enable them to make a purchase decision or a payment decision? And how do we put it in their hands so that it's easy for them to make that decision?
Absolutely. And in fact, if you think about it, another competency that we measure in the emotional intelligence is something we call self-management. And in self-management, one way that you get to ask yourself is, how am I sharpening myself, right? How am I becoming better at what I am doing. Besides other things like just knowing how to manage your time, how to manage your resources. But I like the component of sharpening yourself. When we say that somebody has a high EI, it means that they also practice a very high level of self-management. They continuously do things to improve themselves, improve their health, improve their balance, all those things. But in sharpening yourself, it also means that you are keeping tabs or pulse on how the customer is evolving. And it's interesting, right? So it means that for somebody to be highly effective, even when it comes to organizations that are customer facing, and I would say, 99%, apart from the people who are in the back end and dealing with machines that they don't take customers, most businesses, whether it's service or product, will deal with customers. And customers are changing. Every other generation is different, like we were saying with you. So a highly intelligent individual, and by extension an organization, also practices self-management, meaning that they keep improving themselves and they understand, by the way, the customer that I have today is not the customer I had yesterday or the customer of 10 years ago. So if I need to connect with them, what do they want? Where do they want? What are they feeling? And how is my business adapting to that? And that's a reality. Yeah.
And we've had the stories, the Kodak stories of we've always done things this way, and so we're not even keeping a pulse on what's changing in the marketplace or for the customer. And then what ultimately results is disruption, a good one.
And it's quite true. By
Yeah.
the way, sometimes we blame the company, whether it's Kodak, whether it's Nokia, whether it's Motorola, whatever reason, right? But it's the people that
It's
were
the
there.
individuals in the company.
It's yes, and the leadership, isn't it? So if we say that those leaders then had practiced a high level of emotional intelligence, and those competencies are what they are also practicing, in my opinion, they would probably not have found themselves where they are, or for that matter, in that oblivion in history. For sure, Kodak, I think, was one of the biggest companies. So was Nokia, so was Motorola. And yet their dominance was just shattered very quickly by organizations that demonstrated that AI that we are talking about.
That they were willing to
Yes.
listen to the customer and to
Yes.
keep a pulse on what was changing in the
Absolutely.
market. And you said it's a function of the individuals in the company and more so the leadership. Let's go leadership, right? So we're saying leaders, a good leader or a great leader is emotionally intelligent. That's what we're saying. What are we saying about competency and capacity building in the area of emotional intelligence for leaders? Are we saying that's like a must? Must it be embedded as part of maybe leadership coaching or mentorship within the organization as the building blocks towards succession? Where do you see an organization that's emotionally intelligent, that's practicing self-management, embedding that as a practice, as a way of work, as core competency, even in terms of recruitment? How do you see that play out?
So usually when I teach on AI and leadership, there's a particular case study I refer to, and I think I'll use that as an example. It's the
Okay.
story of Uchumi.
Okay.
And we don't have a very good history of retail hypermarkets in Kenya, right? I think we're probably one of the few countries in our region where three biggest ones collapsed at about the same time.
Imagine.
But the story of Uchumi is interesting because, in one of the research that I was doing, I found two very interesting, I would say, articles or submissions. One was by the Senate, and this was on October in 2018. 2018, I believe, if I'm not wrong. But it was a subcommittee that has been set up, a trade subcommittee in the Senate, and they were looking at what could have contributed to the collapse of Uchumi, and at that time, I think they also looked at Tuskys, right? But I was interested to see exactly what do they feel. And then there was also an interesting study by a gentleman known as Karuki et al. In 2011 when he was doing his MBA, and he tried to see why is Uchumi not able to get back to where they were before. And yet one common thread across this, and I wish I could be able to quote verbatim, but I'll paraphrase it. The parliamentary committee, the Senate Committee on Trade, said that gross mismanagement contributed or was one of the big contributors to the collapse of Uchumi. Now, gross mismanagement is actually by individuals, right? One of the things that we talk about in competencies in emotional intelligence is authenticity, right? And authenticity means, Bella, that who you are, what you say, what you do is the same. Okay, if I come and I stand in front of you with a microphone and say something as a leader, that's exactly what I do. If I come and say that we are practicing prudent financial management techniques in our organization, I go back and do that. When I tell my team that we need to be at the forefront of focusing on the customers, that's what I do, right? And it also means that you are held by your word. In fact, when we talk about value-based leaders, one of those things is really authenticity. Do you what you say and what you do, are they congruent, right? And it's interesting because when I looked at the study by Kariuki, he then went ahead and said that as a result of poor leadership, I'm paraphrasing, the employees became demotivated and therefore did not give the best customer service, and as a result the customers kept trickling away.
Wow.
Right? And I know you're in customer, and we were discussing that with you.
Yes.
And this is a very interesting study. So you can see that because there is a leader who is not emotionally intelligent, and also being in a gross mismanagement, so unauthentic, I would say it's a fraudulent leader. What happens is that the people then who are also being led are even far much more worse. And because they're far much more worse, there's nothing that is really giving that organization, be it a business like Uchumi, the energy, the drive, the velocity that it needs to be able to thrive in the industry. And what happens? You collapse.
Yeah.
And so I think if you ask me, is it important for organizations to have their leaders practice or understand emotional intelligence? I'll tell you, look at the story of Uchumi.
Yeah.
Look at the story of Nakumat.
Yeah.
Look at the story of Tuskys. And we could name endless companies because whatever it is that brought them down, it's leadership, including Nokia that you talked about,
Yeah.
including Kodak,
Yeah.
including Motorola. So is it important? I think we could ask those. We could ask those CEOs.
It is important. It is important. And I think this is also where I do the call to action for our people and culture leaders and the function in the business that's responsible for human capital, right? So there's them mapping who's coming into the organization and the kind of profile that those people being recruited into the organization need to match, not only in terms of technical competency, in terms of a JD, but entirely the profile of the person. There's that, and then there's the existing employees. And, we even mentioned how the different generations are now represented in the workforce and in the workplace, and how emotional intelligent
No, I
that
think
they
it's
are.
the important disclaimer is that by 2027, close to about 90%, we're talking about 87%, will be most likely Gen Zs. Even millennials will have reduced significantly
In the next 2 years,
in the next 2 years. Yes,
the workforce were globally or
Kenya.
or in Kenya.
In Kenya.
Oh, wow.
in Kenya, yeah,
90% of
almost because
90%.
it's between 85 to 90%, which is quite significant. They are the ones that are going to be taking workplaces. I would say we call them the late millennials and early Gen Zs. Yes.
And that said, they will be leading teams. That
Yes.
set will be leading
Yes.
teams. Some
Yes.
of their leaders will still be millennials,
Yes.
as well as Gen
But
X.
they're going to be coming definitely into the first line, middle level management. They're going to be more. But overall, in organizations, the numbers are now going to begin to tilt towards the generation.
And we are saying that being emotionally intelligent, or the people and culture function, needs to be preparing or should be ready right now. If we're talking about
Absolutely.
readiness,
Absolutely.
they should be ready right now for that wave
Absolutely.
that's going to happen and that's going to change.
Yes.
And then bring in the fact that now we're in the age of AI, where tasks and how we used to do our jobs essentially is going to change. I think in other forums we've also mentioned the fear around jobs that will become obsolete, and we've said it's not necessarily that the job will be done away with, it is the way in which the job is done. So there will be areas of efficiency in terms of tasks. There are some tasks that you can automate and or delegate to an AI tool, an AI agent, for that to happen. So
Absolutely.
now we are mapping.
And then they would be better
Yeah.
in terms of the outcomes.
Yes. yeah, and closing in on any cycle times and lead times that we previously used to do manually or were part of the human experience. So now my question is going towards now that you have full view of business functions, my question is going towards and tilting towards the people and culture function and what that means in terms of them preparing their business strategically for these changes.
I think,
How that maps or layers to emotional intelligence, artificial intelligence.
yeah, I think if you ask me, Bella, we've always said that organizations are like living organisms. And so it means that for organizations to really future proof themselves, they cannot afford now to wait until they get into a crisis. They must have a system in place where the individuals that are being brought in are not only people that thrive in emotional intelligence, they are critical problem solvers, they practice critical thinking, they are more solution oriented. And it means that even as you onboard these people into the organization, that's the culture that you want to inculcate. And sadly, we still have organizations where they don't have a clear onboarding program. They are not even sure whether the onboarding program actually helps the employees, the new employees, to be more engaged with the organization. And I keep saying, look at the study that Gallup published in 2023. And they said that 83% of Kenyans are actually just warming seats and watching the clock,
I'm telling you.
right? And we call them the quiet quitters. So if your organization is saddled, it's got a larger population of people that are just quiet quitters, how will you thrive? How will you outperform competition? How will you manage to grow your market share? None of those things will happen. And yet I always feel that organizations will invest thinking that we are putting in more money so that we can expand, grow, and get dominance in terms of our market share. Yet on the other hand, there's nothing that you're doing that is really getting the people to be able to deliver on that ambition that you want.
Yeah. Brings in the employee experience to customer experience dynamic.
Absolutely.
And we've been saying the employee is not going to give what they do not have in their cup, what they are not receiving in terms of engagement at the workplace, fulfillment, job rotation, job shadowing, any way and form that you can motivate the employee to give their best ultimately translates into how the customer experiences your brand, your product, your service. Now, you've mentioned certain traits of the kind of employees that we need to be bringing on board into the current workforce and how the workforce is changing. And once you started to mention those, I gravitated towards Angela's book, Grit. Yeah. And she speaks about the balance, if at all there's a balance, between passion and perseverance and what it looks like to become gritty or to be an individual that we can say has high levels of grit. And also she battles with, are you able to grow your level of grit? And do you want to comment on that take?
So, first, I think we must have done Angela's book during COVID-19, The Grit. But I think in essence, what we are talking about, people just understanding these competencies and really going out there to build it in themselves. If you think about it, it's just saying you need to build the grit. It's interesting because, in my opinion, if I was to paraphrase it, I would say grit is like a muscle. And the more you practice it in the different ways that you sort of sharpen those things, then the more sharper it becomes, right? And or rather, if you're looking at it as a muscle, then the more elastic it becomes, the more you can be able to use it. And the opposite is quite true. And so, in essence, if you're doing nothing to build that particular competency in yourself, then also it completely begins to die off. And as I said, you become almost like an empty void. And so there's a dual benefit, not just in terms of building it and therefore becoming better than you are, but also being able to use it to then be able to navigate. May I say this thing called life? Because we don't talk about work and life, we say it's just life. And the reason why you find that for most organizations, like you're saying, they're not able to find that balance is because some of the owners of businesses still don't, or they still think that the person coming to work in my business is, when they come to my work, they're a different person. When they go home, they're
They're
a
a
different
different
person.
person.
I don't care how their home is. I don't care where they are living. I don't care whether they are happy at their home. I don't care whether they have food at their home. As long as when they're at work, they are focusing. That, I think, is becoming a very thin line. And you're right, Bella. Organizations, and this is part of what we were talking about in terms of even awareness of others. Organizations that are able to demonstrate that we don't just look at our people for what they are bringing at the place of work, but also how their families are, in my opinion, are the ones that are going to survive way into the future. These other ones where the people are just treated like machines, it really is only a matter of time. Because then people will realize that I do not even want to be affiliated. And where we are going with that generation that is, I say, much behind us, they also want to see a company they're buying from that what does this company do to support the environment, to support the climate control, to support the community that they're working in. And if your parent says that, you know what, this is one of the places where I got high blood pressure. I got mini strokes.
We are
To be
not
honest,
purchasing any of their
not
products
even
or
that,
their services.
even to be
Even
associated
association,
becomes a problem.
we are not being seen
Exactly.
next to them
Yeah.
anywhere.
So, I mean, it's part of what you said is the changes that we need to be cognizant, and that's what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you're taking me towards the ESG agenda and where it sits in organizations right now. There's a sense of responsibility that organizations need to have towards the environment, towards the social and, quality improvement of people's lives, as well as governance. Of the three, my favorite is on governance.
I suspected.
Because, oh, really? Oh, really? It's my favorite. So, in the areas of creating policy and these policies being embedded within the organization as being the way of work, as being our culture, as being our values, and not just elements that we speak about, but that we practice and are part of who we are. Do you want to tell us a little bit about governance of organizations? And then maybe also, again, layer it with the topics we've been discussing.
I think the easier one, Bella, would still be authenticity, because for me, I look at authenticity as probably the closest competency that talks about governance, because authenticity is also the way in which you treat people. It's the way you treat organizations. It's the way you anchor your values in everything that you do, the way you lead. And we normally say as part of emotional intelligence, it's not just a competency that helps you to survive, or the organizations to survive, but it also is in itself a moral compass, right? And where we have seen that there is lack of, which also strongly indicates deficiency in terms of emotional intelligence, that it's organizations that actually bleed. They bleed in terms of scandals. They bleed in terms of mismanagement. They bleed in terms of books that are not balancing. They bleed in terms of the number of cases where you have employees implicated in theft, in swindling, in siphoning of the funds. So, I mean, if you think about it, there's a strong benefit to having authenticity in leadership and organization that really has a value-based mantra, because it sort of then percolates down where everybody holds that responsibility quite strongly. Yeah. And between me and you, right? We've seen in Kenya in the last couple of days, I'm sure you've seen articles and papers of big organizations and they have political rumbles.
Oh my.
And I would say people call them politics or leadership wrangles, but we really know that the real thing is just there's no authenticity, and there's no honesty, there's no governance, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it really is quite costly for businesses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you say to a leader who comes into an organization? They are emotionally intelligent, they are self-aware, they are authentic in their leadership, they have an understanding of self-management, and they come into an organization where leaders at their same level in terms of technical competency are not a match for their emotional intelligence. Walk us through what that looks like in terms of staying with the organization, opting to stay with the organization, what the optics look like for their career trajectory, what it looks like to intentionally build a culture, a certain type of culture. I think there's those leaders who, once you move either in rank or in organization, you're having to deal with that element of change, of environment, change in terms of embracing that this is a different work culture and making a choice on your tenure in that organization, but also how you will influence within that organization.
So I think there are two ways to look at it, right? If you're the leader and you're the person that has taken up leadership at the organization, and obviously let's say you're highly emotionally intelligent and you find that the team that reports to you, for example, or some of the team members really lack and probably could even be on the other extreme end when it comes to emotional intelligence. I think as a leader, that's a very great honor because then you can be able to paint a new brush within this organization. Of course, you work with the people that you get like-minded people and determine that this is a vision we want to be able to build. And so with time, those that are able to adapt very quickly sort of become a part of the organization, and at the same time recognizing those that are unlikely to change and in some cases even be a risk to the organization in terms of negative influence. And of course, being able to very quickly dispense with them or, letting go. There's nothing wrong with letting go people that are not only derailing the organization, but probably even likely to lead it to a collapse. There's no negotiation about that. It's different when you have entered in and let's say you're senior management or you are middle level management and you realize that the person that you're reporting to, for example, doesn't have emotional intelligence. And it's interesting because I had this talk with the faculty of one of the partners that we work with, and it's a group of higher education learning institution. And I remember getting a call. It's interesting we're talking about this now. Getting a call from one of the lecturers and telling me, when you were talking about emotional intelligence, I was really wishing that my head of department could get like an emoji. I was almost tempted to try and comment why, and I said, why was that the case? Because I feel like our head of department is such a micromanager, and I'm just quoting verbatim. We would submit our work that needs to be done. The head of department would completely quash everything and then just give you new instructions, not telling you to think. But that's a reality, right?
Yeah.
And I was saying, I mean, it's important that because it's a place where you are not alone and you are with other people that are different, I would say, heads. It's important to sit down and be honest about it and decide that, look, if we're going to navigate or continue working together, we need to agree on certain rules and regulations we're going to work with. And nonetheless, I would say it's more difficult when you're the person who is charged with the responsibility of trying to change your leader.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Now,
It could go south very fast.
Newton, I recently got certified as a ProSci change practitioner. It was quite the process. As we understand with certifications, you have to first go through, acquiring the knowledge, internalizing it, and probably going through the practical application of that knowledge, and then assessment of that application of the knowledge. And in the change practitioner model, we have the ADCA model by ProSci. And as you would guess, the first R stands for awareness.
It's surprising, yeah.
No surprise there. And then D goes for desire. And in awareness, it is that people are aware of the change. And then D is desire. You're creating a desire in individuals, and you're able to answer for what's in it for me. They are also able to answer for what's in it for me in this change. Yeah. Then K is knowledge. Do I necessarily have the tools, and am I equipped to handle the change? And then the second R is for ability. So that's demonstrable. You have to be able to show that you are able to cope with this change. And then R is for reinforcement. So we've gone through a whole change cycle, the before, the after, and then are we able to sustain the outcomes of this change? Are we able to continue to measure in positive light, hopefully, the changes? Yeah. And from the conversation we've had, I've been mapping. I've been mapping what it looks like to be an emotional, intelligent leader who is able to not only guide myself, but be aware of how to guide other team members during change. Now, one of the huge challenges in reinforcing change or even just starting the change cycle is resistance. I mean, we know there's early adopters, most of whom are like the smallest percentage, but there's people that resist simply because you've announced that there's a change that's coming. Now, let's layer resistance of change with leadership and emotional intelligence.
It's become quite a
It's
quite a complex one, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting because we usually say that resistance is something that has been there from time immemorial. In fact, human beings, in my opinion, are genetically wired to resist, and right from history, and that's why even when man first realized the benefit that fire was going to provide, it didn't immediately get them to move on to actually building houses. You know, they still stayed in caves even with the fire, and so as we've seen human beings evolve and because of the intelligence develop many things. People struggled even to stop using horses, even though the first car had already demonstrated that it's not like a horse. It doesn't need to rest at some point in time, and so in fact, when you look at articles in the late 1800s and starting 1900s, most people dismissed that
The
there's
use
no
of
future.
cars.
Yes, there's no future. The same thing was said about
Henry
Telem.
Ford was fighting
Yes.
the
So
let's change to cars.
I think we are wired. But think of it in the context of both leadership and an emotional intelligent leader. Even when you're driving change, I like what you said about awareness. For me, when I talk about change, I usually reference Kotler's book on change. And he says the first thing you do is create a sense of urgency, right?
Yes.
But in order to create a sense of urgency, and he normally says, sure, for you to really get people to see it, you have to understand them. I like what you were saying earlier, that you have to have walked a mile in their shoe.
Yeah.
So I can't come and tell you that this is a new change, that if we don't do it, things are going to get down, unless I am aware about you, right? And so you can see that there's a correlation. And therefore, the leaders who are not strong in terms of awareness about others would find it difficult to demonstrate why there's a sense of urgency without explaining how it affects the other person. How will you then be able to drive change? Because if you don't get the sense of urgency, you can't even begin to talk about why do we need to change? What is the change about? What's the vision of this particular change? Do we have a team in place that can be able to help us, a powerful team to be able to help us to drive the change? All those things, like for example, talking about a powerful team is just being able to work with people. It means you're aware about yourself, you're aware about others, you're practicing emotional reasoning, you're authentic, and so people find it easier to be able to work with you. And when they do that, they will support the change.
The change that's
So
coming.
yes, can I might not necessarily point to a particular study, but I'm absolutely sure that those leaders that have successfully managed to drive change also demonstrated a high level
Of emotional intelligence. I'm willing to bet on that one
Yes,
as well.
and the opposite is true. Those that struggled were probably quite hard-headed, and they wanted to bulldoze. And
Yeah.
in some cases, you may feel like you've succeeded because you're the boss, you own the business.
Threats.
Yes, but the implications of that is that
Will show.
whereas you'd have probably had a much more smoother uptake and highly impactful, people will take it because they don't have a choice. But in some cases, you'll see the impact of that forcefulness coming in both in the short term and in the long term.
And in the long term. Yeah.
Yeah.
And going back to Angela's book on grit, there is how long are you able to stick with something, and even when is the right time that you know you need to walk away from a couple of things. And so we are not measuring your grittiness by sticking with something for a bit too long, but that you have the intelligence to know that it no longer serves me. And from here hence, I've learned what I had to learn, and I can pivot. I can move in a different direction. She even goes into a bit of parenting where she mentions her daughters and how they're intentionally building grit for their daughters and how they're enabling them to experiment, to try a couple of different things before they land on this one thing that they have chosen to stick with for a while. Yeah. So in closing, Newton, let's summarize today's conversation. I mean, we've layered it pretty thick.
Absolutely.
We've layered it pretty thick. We've taken our audience from we are lover of books and we are avid readers. I think by now people now know that about us. We are leaders and we are intentional in how we lead our teams. We are self-aware and we are constantly looking for ways to improve ourselves and to develop those skills. Do you want to just close for us with some closing remarks?
I'd like to say that it's interesting. In the end, life is very short, much more shorter than what we think. One of the biggest philosophies that I subscribe to, or person that one is one of my mentors, is Dr. Wayne Dyer, right? And Dr. Wayne Dyer said something that was quite powerful, has always remained with me. We are spiritual beings having an earthly experience. And I think sometimes we forget that when you're having an earthly experience, you're in this temporary body that is only going to be there for a very short time. In my opinion, I think a lot of people struggle and they find it difficult to even have great relationships, whether it's at work or personal. And it simply boils down to just being difficult and not appreciating the fact that, by the way, if I really practice this emotional intelligence, I can be happy. I can be able to live this period that I have, because every time a new person is born, a new baby is born, it's also a reminder that it's time for somebody else to exit. Always remember that. With every birth, it's also a stark reminder that somebody has a time has lapsed.
Ended.
And that's the way life is. So for me, I think emotional intelligence is something that you can be able to practice. It doesn't just help you to be able to grow as an individual, to navigate this particular pathway, but because now we have this integration between our life, our work, our personal relationships with kids, for example, I think in the end, there's a greater benefit that you get by practicing it than by not doing it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. I am sure your commentary will be coming through in terms of the interesting conversation we have had today. Thank you very much, Newton Siele, CEO, and I remain Rosabella Abok, Global Customer Experience Expert. Thank you again, Steve, and the CEP team.